There is no dramatic exit, no ultimatum delivered across a heated argument, no slamming of doors or final declarations. The empath does not leave the way people in movies leave. They do not even leave the way most people expect them to leave. They simply begin to go quiet, and by the time you notice the quiet, they are already mostly gone. This is the thing about empaths that the people who lose them almost never understand until it is too late. The leaving does not begin on the day they stop responding to your messages. It begins much earlier, in a series of small, almost invisible interior moments where something in them registers a truth that their conscious mind is still trying to argue against. A moment at a dinner table where they smiled at something you said, while something deeper in them made a quiet notation. A night where they lay awake, not with grief, but with a clarity that had been building for longer than they realized. A morning where they woke up and felt, for just a moment, what their life might feel like without the weight of this particular dynamic in it. And that moment of feeling was enough. Empaths are not fragile. This is the first misunderstanding most people carry about them. They are among the most resilient psychological structures a human being can inhabit. They have survived, feeling everything in a world that is often overwhelming. They have metabolized other people's pain alongside their own for most of their lives. They have continued to show up with an open heart in circumstances that would have closed most people off permanently. But resilience is not the same as inexhaustibility, and the empath's particular form of strength has a specific and non-negotiable limit. They cannot stay where they are not genuinely felt. Carl Jung wrote about the fundamental human need for what he called psychological visibility, the experience of being known by another person not at the surface level of roles and functions and pleasantries, but at the deeper level of one's actual interior life. Jung believed that chronic invisibility, the persistent experience of being in connection with someone who could not or would not truly see you, was one of the most corrosive forces the psyche could endure, not dramatic enough to be called trauma by most definitions, but quietly, consistently erosive in a way that compounds over time into something that fundamentally alters a person's relationship with connection itself. For an empath, this erosion happens faster and cuts deeper than it does for most. Here is what will make an empath disappear. Consistency without depth. Showing up reliably in all the practical senses while remaining emotionally unavailable in the ways that actually matter to them. Being present in the room but absent from the conversation. Answering questions without ever asking them. Filling the shared space with noise and routine while leaving the interior of the relationship completely unexplored. The empath will tolerate this for a time. They will tell themselves that people show love in different ways. They will find meaning in the smaller gestures. They will try to need less, but they are built for depth the way lungs are built for air. And you can only hold your breath for so long, dismissing what they feel, not necessarily with cruelty, with the quieter and somehow more damaging form of dismissal that comes wrapped in rationality. You are too sensitive. You are reading too much into it. That is not what I meant. Why do you always make things so complicated? Each of these sentences, delivered enough times, does something specific to the empath's interior landscape. It teaches them that their perception is a liability, that the very thing that makes them who they are is an inconvenience to the person who claims to want them. And the empath, who has spent their entire life learning to trust what they feel, will begin to do the most painful thing they are capable of. They will begin to doubt themselves. And then one day, they will stop doubting and simply decide that a relationship requiring them to distrust their own interior life is not one they are willing to continue inhabiting. Using their empathy against them, this is the one that does the most damage and leaves the least visible mark. The empath's capacity for understanding is extraordinary. They can hold your perspective even when it contradicts their own experience. They can find compassion for your limitations, even when those limitations are actively hurting them. They will understand why you did what you did. They will make room for your complexity at the expense of honoring their own pain. Some people discover this and use it, not always consciously, but they learn that the empath will absorb rather than retaliate. The empath will allow this longer than. The empath will allow this longer than they should, because understanding is their nature, and abandoning their nature feels like a kind of self-betrayal. But eventually, something shifts. The understanding does not disappear, but the willingness to remain in a dynamic that exploits it does. Jung believed that every human being carries an innate drive toward what he called individuation, the soul's movement toward its own wholeness. This drive cannot be permanently suppressed. Life will activate it through exactly the kind of pain that comes from remaining too long in a connection that requires self-abandonment. For the empath, the disappearance is that drive finally being honored. They do not leave because they stopped caring. The empath almost never stops caring. They carry the people they have loved in ways that would surprise those people if they knew. They leave because they started caring about themselves with the same devotion they had spent years directing outward. And once that shift happens, once the empath turns the full force of their extraordinary capacity for feeling toward their own life, their own needs, their own unlived possibilities, the pull of a dynamic that required them to be less than they are simply loses its gravity. You will not see it coming. That is the nature of the empath's exit. Quiet, complete, and by the time it is visible, already finished. The door does not slam. It closes softly, with a care that is characteristic of everything they did while they were still choosing to stay.